In the shamanic way of doing things, and this is a shamanic path, there's no belief that's required. In Huna we say belief is necessary only for that which is not real. That which is real is recognizable. You can recognize reality. And it works reliably and flawlessly. So as a Kahuna priest, we don't ever ask anybody to believe us. As a matter of fact, we basically say the opposite. Please don't believe us. Don't believe anything I say. Because if you're having to believe it, you're not where it's at. And the power happens when you're in alignment with what's real out there. And it's very scientific, actually. It's a very early way of looking at the world that is extremely scientific. And we say it's a postulate-based system of wisdom. No. Postulates are principles that you just intuitively know are real. They don't require belief. So, for instance, in the world of mathematics, we would say that there's an inherent difference between something and nothing. And so from that there is spawned the digital age, eventually, because there is an inherent difference between something and nothing. The idea that there's an inherent difference between something and nothing, something whatever it is and nothing whatever that is something you can intuitively know is real. And that's what we call a postulate. In geometry, if we have a plane, we can say that if there are 2 points on that plane, the shortest distance between those 2 points is a straight line. So that's a postulate. So this is a postulate-based system of wisdom. That means that no belief is required. And the problem with Western religion, for me and for a lot of folks generally, is that most of it is based on dogma. Now, what's dogma? You have to have faith, and it's something you can't intuitively know to be real. So there's all kinds of dogma-based religions that are out there, and they're fine for their purpose, but they don't have the power, for me, that this way has. Now, just because I say this is shamanic, and it's a postulate-based system of wisdom, I don't want to imply that all things that carry the label shamanism are like this, because there's a lot of stuff out there that's real weird, and it gets way off into Never Never Land, and it's called shamanic. But in the Hawaiian way, and with most of the Native American medicine people that I work with that are for real medicine people, they would all agree that stuff is way out there and really bears very little resemblance to real shamanistic ways of looking at life. Whatever that stuff is, what I want to confine ourselves to in this system of wisdom, Huna, is absolute, intuitive. This step is a foundation for the next step, which becomes a foundation for the next step, and everything ties together. And at no time is it ever required for you to have to believe something. Now, what does happen, however, on this path is that a lot of the things we're going to teach are different enough from the way that people in this culture have a tendency to look at these ideas that you'll find that your brain starts to stretch. And it creates this place inside of you where the importance of what's just been said is kind of stunning in a way, and you just have to back up and digest it in smaller pieces. So again, we don't want belief. All we ask is that you be humble, and I want to define what we mean by humility. Humility is the ability to look at something from a different perspective. That's what we mean when we use the word humility in Huna. Humility in the Hawaiian language, the best word for it is ha-ahaha. And in Hawaiian, that means to be flexible in perspective. The best way to translate it that I've been able to find in English is humility, but that's kind of a problematic word, because for a lot of people who come from this culture, that also carries the connotation of being less than, or lowly, or I'm no good, and or that's better. The idea of the Catholic act of contrition, where it's mea culpa, mea maxima culpa, through my fault, through my fault, through my most grievous fault. It's like this: we're born in sin, we're dog meat, and the only way that we can ever be possibly justified is because Jesus died for our sins and we're going to go to heaven. And that is not what we mean by humility. Humility is the ability to be flexible in perspective. Now, there's another one of those postulates that you can just know about, and I happen to know that most of us here are people who've spent some time in the outdoors. And you know that what you see in the outdoors depends an awful lot on where you stand, right? So you can be standing someplace and think that the shortest distance from here to there is let's just walk right on over there. But you get walking right on over there, and about half a mile away, you come up to the edge of a sheer cliff, and it's 1,500 feet straight down, and you're looking into a real rocky bottomed river, and 1,500 feet straight up the other side, and you realize the shortest way to get over to that other point is not that way. You have to maybe go around a little bit and get to the place where you can get over there. So unless you happen to have the ability to have a hot air balloon or an airplane or something and fly across there, but that's the nature of spirituality, is that we want to find the perspective that allows us to see things for what they are. I like to use the example all the time, like that candle on the altar. If you can imagine that as a clear glass cylinder. If I held that just right, you'd be swearing that you saw a circle. And he'd be swearing that he sees a rectangle. And if you're typical white people, you'd probably wind up coming to blows over it, needing to be right about whether it's a rectangle or a circle. But in reality, if all of a sudden I was able to turn that around and let you to see it from other points of view, all of a sudden what you'd see is, oh, it's a cylinder. I can use this to make a candle, I can use it to take a drink of water, whatever it happens to be. And in that moment, when you see reality, both of you come into agreement. Now, therein is what's so powerful about this. Because whether you're in relationship with yourself, whether you're in relationship with a significant other, whether you're in relationship with a government, whether your government is in relationship with some other government that comes from some other culture, that's the way to peace, is to be able to see what's real. Because once you get the ability to see what's real, there's no need to fight about it anymore. And that's the nature of our world. And the reason why we fight so much is because we have these tendencies to believe that reality is something less than what it actually is. And therein is a part of why this is such a powerful path. And that's why we call it the way of wisdom. Because wisdom is something that's a lot bigger than knowledge. And that's something that, again, if you're very old at all, you got to have some awareness of. You said something yesterday when we were having our counseling session about when you went to school for your master's degree, and you wound up finding that some of those professors, I'll paraphrase and just make it short, just really weren't very wise. They were trying to get you to regurgitate a bunch of knowledge, but they weren't really teaching you anything, right? And I had the same experience when I was going to school. There are a lot of professors, and they have a lot of knowledge, but they don't have any wisdom. And they don't have any ability, therefore, to impart anything except a whole bunch of stuff, some of which is factual and some of which is not factual. And that's an interesting sort of a thing. I had a business professor in college who thought that he was the author of several textbooks. He was a guy who was really looked up to as being a hotshot professor of business at this big business school, and he went into business with a couple of other professors, and they were going to do, I don't even remember what it was they were going to do. They were broke in 6 months. And all that knowledge doesn't make for success. Knowledge has to be tempered by the fires of experience. That's what the center of this altar represents in the bowl there. That's why the fire's in the center. That side over there, the east, is knowledge. This side over here, the west, is experience. And we put knowledge and experience together, and we burn away all the stuff that isn't real. What we do is we create a marriage of knowledge and experience, and that marriage is what we call wisdom. And wisdom is a lot bigger than knowledge or experience. And we get what's called a synergistic effect. You know what synergism is? It's when the sum is, when this thing is bigger than the sum of its parts. Lonnie and I have been together for 27 years now. And we love each other a lot. And there's been a real marriage that has been worked out here. But I can tell you that who we are now together is bigger than either one of us ever was alone. And I think we're really bigger than just what you'd expect from two people coming together. And so in life, there's a lot of things that are that way. We want to forge these marriages, and when we do, we open a door to a place that's bigger, to a place that's more powerful than the place we were at before. So wisdom is not only about having facts and sorting out which facts are real and which facts aren't real. But wisdom is also about finding out then what's relevant about all of that. What does that have to do with me and my situation in the world? And when we have that kind of wisdom, that's what the Hawaiians call ike papalua, the high sight that has power, or what the Native Americans call eagle vision. So we're not looking for belief. What we're looking to do is learn skills and perspectives that unlock wisdom. And wisdom is a very powerful thing. And wisdom helps us to understand our own nature and the nature of the world that's around us and the nature of our life. And when we can do that, all of a sudden, when we come into alignment with reality, we notice that life energy starts to flow. And here's where we're going to come to the thing that is probably the most remarkable difference between this path and most things this world has ever seen. And that is, we're going to start with a postulate that the only definition for the word God that can possibly make any sense is that God is all that is. Now, there's a lot of folks out there that hear that and, goes in the mind, and it's one of those nice things to say, and you'll even hear people repeat affirmations that may include that kind of an idea, but they haven't got a clue about what they're really saying when they say that. And where they come from is this place of deep inner programming that's been done in this culture where God is really something that's out there somewhere. God's somebody that looks about like him except with a whiter beard and hair, and sits up on this throne, and he's if I've pleased him, if I've pleased him, then it's going to be okay. But if I haven't pleased God, my ass is going to burn in hell for all eternity. And they don't get it, that what they're saying is absolutely nonsensical. Now, I grant you that the vast majority of the Earth's population has looked at God that way, but that doesn't make it real. There was a time when the vast majority of the Earth's population thought the Earth was flat and the Earth was the center of the universe, too. That didn't make it real. I submit to you the only definition of the word God that can possibly make any sense is that God is all that is, and that is, in fact, a postulate. And it's important that you take some time to take that inside and notice what that really means. One of the things that it means is that you and every part of your life is made out of God. Because by that definition, there is nothing else out of which it can be made. And that's what we mean when we say you're divine. You are a divine being. And that's what got me arrested in Hawaii by a born-again Christian district attorney who thought I was an agent of Satan. True. You are divine. You and every part of your life is made out of God. And so is Saddam Hussein and every part of his life, and Adolf Hitler and every part of his life, and your next door neighbor and every part of their life, and your unconscious daughter and every part of her life, and whatever all that stuff is, it's all made out of God. Everything in this world is made out of God. The trees out there, the pack animals that we used to pack in with when we go hunting, they're made out of God. They're all a part of God. Those elk and those deer that we're going after, the fish that I love to catch out of those streams, the streams themselves, the sky, the clouds, the earth herself, the sun, everything in the universe that you can see, all of it is made out of God, because there's nothing else out of which it can be made. And I'll even go so far as to tell you that if you can name anything that is not a part of God, then your definition of God is too little. Which kind of rules out the idea of a Satan and hell, which is another thing that gets certain fundamentalists really cranked up. And they don't have to be just Christian. Muslims also get real cranked up about that idea, because they also believe in a Satan and in a hell. And you'll notice I said the word belief. They believe. Why do they believe? Because you can't know it to be real. That requires a belief. Why does it require a belief? Because in fact it's not real. It's not in alignment with that postulate, so you have to believe it. Now that doesn't mean that there is not evil in the world, and there is. But the way we define evil is the opposite of life energy. It's that which blocks life energy. Evil is live, spelled backwards. What there isn't, and this is going to be a shocking idea, and I'll explain it more in a little bit, especially would you remind me to do it in case I lose track, but what's real is that there is no such thing as good or bad or right or wrong. And why those things aren't real is because those things, you can't show me anything in this world that is good or bad or right or wrong. Those things are opinions that we label something with, but they in themselves, nothing out there that's real can be categorized as good, bad, right, or wrong. It's an impossibility. And therefore, one of the problems we have in this world is our moral standard is too unreal to do us much good. And that's why we have so much crime, and that's how come we have so much war. Because people get all wrapped up in the idea of good and bad and right and wrong as a moral standard. But the problem is we don't all agree as to what those things are. So to those Arabs who ran those airplanes into the buildings on 9/11, the World Trade Center, they thought they were doing a good thing. They thought they were going to go to heaven and inherit 72 virgins or whatever it is that they believe. You know, I don't want to put myself in an arrogant place of saying what they believe, but they wouldn't have done it had they not thought it was a quote-unquote good thing and that what they were doing was quote-unquote right. But if you happen to be a person who is in that building or related to a person who is in that building or an American, I'll never forget it, watching TV that morning, and especially I turn it on and I can see the first burning building, and then the newscasters are talking, and then you see this other airplane coming into the picture. And it's not dawning on everybody what's happening, and then all of a sudden the next airplane is coming into the picture. I mean, that airplane's getting closer and closer, and then it hits the second building. And everybody's going, this has to be terrorism. You know, this can't have been an accident. Wow, you know, and all the stuff that started, and you see people jumping out of these, 60 floors up or wherever it is that they're jumping out of in order to try to get out of these buildings. And there's a place inside of you, if you're human, you look at that and it's gut-wrenching. It was for me. You can imagine somebody's wife who knows that her husband's up there in that 80th floor or something, and she's sitting there realizing he's not going to come home that night. And she happens to have 4 little kids at home. And I'll promise you, she did not think that that was a good thing. She thought that was a bad thing. and that those people were wrong to do it. So that moral standard is a function of perspective, simply because it's not, you can't tie it to anything that's real. There's nothing that is inherently good, bad, right, or wrong. But you see, this God, this all that is, God lives in harmony with God's self. And that condition of harmony is what we call love. So when we are in alignment with that harmony, we're finding that life energy flows. And when we are not in harmony with that reality, if we're unconscious and we've taken ourselves and we can't see what's real, and we start behaving according to beliefs that are not real, then we shut down the flow of that life energy because we take ourselves outside of that place of reality, and what we wind up with is pain. And that kind of thing is what we call evil. So what we teach is that it's much better to replace a moral standard based on good, bad, right, wrong, which is essentially a matter of opinion, with a moral standard based on that which is loving. Because there's no opinion there. We define love, and we'll get into this in much deeper level if you get involved in this and go deeper with us. Love is a doing thing. It's doing what's in the highest and best interest of everyone involved. If we're all a part of God, if God is all that is, then we're all connected. And so another postulate would be that whatever I do to you affects me because we're connected. And I can't win at your expense. There's only win-win and lose-lose in this world, ultimately. There is no such thing as win-lose. So if I do something to hurt you, ultimately I've done something to hurt me, because we're all the same. And so love is doing something that's in everybody's highest and best interest. Well, from that point of view, you can take a look at that act that occurred on 9/11, and it's very obvious it was not a loving act, because it was not in the highest and best interest of everyone involved. And in fact, since that day, everyone associated with that act has been losing. Whether it's Al-Qaeda or America or the families of the people that have been involved directly in that problem, nobody has won in that dynamic. Everybody has had pain, everybody's continuing to get pain, and the pain hasn't even stopped yet. It's going to get a lot worse, actually, and it appears to me, before it gets better, because that unloving act has spawned now a whole cascade of other unloving acts that are all related to that same unconsciousness that created that thing to happen to begin with. So on this path, we define God to be all that is, and we replace a moral standard based on opinions of what's good, bad, right, and wrong with the reality of that which is loving and that which is not loving. And when you really get what we mean by love, you'll see that that is not an opinion. Now God, therefore, if God is all that is, then we have this word that gets used a lot in this language called reality. And we want to make some sense out of that word. And it's real popular nowadays for people to think that all reality is relative. There's your reality, and there's your reality, and there's your reality, and your reality, and your reality, and my reality, and that's the reality that we label with the little r. And what you see depends upon where you're standing. So if you're in a place where you're not able to see what's real, we're using that example of the cylinder again, your reality is that it's a circle. His reality is that it's a rectangle. And the reality, the big R, what's true, is that neither one of those things are real with the big R. So there's another postulate we talk about, and that is that there is such a thing as the big reality, the big R. Now, science doesn't have a hard time with this because science has to operate according to this all the time. There are certain perspectives and laws or principles and laws that govern the structure and function of this universe. And the whole discipline of science is based on that idea that there is an absolute reality that can be determined. Now, theoretically, it's hard to determine the exact reality in all things all the time. We get that. But the whole nature of the scientific method is to be able to have a hypothesis, to do experiments. The experiments then refine the hypothesis, and eventually we come to a thesis or a theory that we say explains this thing, whatever it is we're trying to explain. And the only reason it's called a theory instead of a reality with the big R is because we make room for the fact that as human beings we're unconscious, and our ability to devise methods of experimentation and measure things have practical limits where it's impossible to always get right down to the absolute nitty-gritty of the reality. And so we want to be able, as time goes on, we want to bring more skill as ideas unfold in different disciplines. We get a higher and higher and higher perspective all the time, and we may find that our theory needs to be refined slightly here or there, the other thing. But that whole pursuit is based on the idea that ultimately reality, that big R, is approachable, if not entirely knowable. And when it's approachable, there's a benefit in it, because once we get clear about what that big R is, to some degree at least, all of a sudden we can make it of practical value to ourselves in our lives. If I can understand how your brain works, then if I'm a marketer, maybe I'm able to improve my ability to sell my product on TV. If I can understand how the laws of thermodynamics work, I have the ability to manufacture an automobile and we don't have to use a horse to ride across town anymore. If I can understand the laws of aerodynamics, I can build an airplane. And we can travel from one part of the country to another in a matter of hours instead of a matter of months. Because reality is approachable, the more we understand it, the more we can get in harmony with that reality, the more we have the ability to live in harmony with reality, the more life energy flows, the more things work. And so that's kind of another postulate. The more we're in harmony with reality, the more our lives work. So if you haven't been too happy lately, if there's something going on in your life that is not really thrilling for you, if you're in a position where you're having problems and difficulties, what you can know for sure, at one level or another, is that your life isn't working, and the reason it isn't working is at some level you're calling for an upgrade to your perspective so that you can get in touch with what's real. Because once you get in touch with what's real, life energy starts to flow again. And it's an automatic process. It's absolutely reliable. It works every time. It's kind of refreshing for a religious or spiritual kind of a discussion, isn't it? Most people, it is. It's real different, and most people say, wow, man, this makes sense. And they're always surprised that they're having a spiritual discussion that actually makes sense. Now, just so you know, this thing I'm teaching you, the Hawaiians say, is at least 40,000 years old. Pretty amazing. And the name of it is called Ho'ala Huna. Ho'ala is a Hawaiian word that at the deepest level means something that causes an awakening. And Huna is a Hawaiian word that means the reality of something, the isness of something, that big R. So Ho'ala Huna is that which causes an awakening to the isness or the nature of reality. Now, the Hawaiian language is a coded language, and it has, each word is made out of root words, and every root word has several levels of meaning. So on the surface, Huna is a word that means secret. At the deeper level, it means the reality of something. Why are those two words connected? Because for most people, what's real remains a secret. They're not able to see it. Why aren't they able to see it? Because they're operating from a belief. They've got these colored glasses on where they have an impossible time seeing what's actually real right in front of their nose. If I have a need to be right about my politics, and let's assume that I'm a Republican, and I find out that you're a Democrat, what I'm going to have to do is make you wrong. If I'm a Catholic and I find out that you're a Mormon, I'm going to have to make you wrong. If I'm a Christian and you're a Muslim, I'm going to have to make you wrong. And all of a sudden there are these places where we're at odds with one another. This right-wrong thing creates separation. That's another proof of how you can know it's not real, because the reality is we're all connected. So if I'm seeing separation in something where there is no separation, it's only because I got a belief that doesn't allow me to see the connection. And that's another proof coming the other direction that this moral system or this whole concept of good, bad, right, and wrong can't possibly be real, because I'm seeing separation where there doesn't need to be any separation. So it's very important that we get it. Now, here's another one. This is where your mind needs to stretch a little bit. Okay? God is all that is. So therefore, not only does God contain all this stuff we look at around ourselves in the universe and all these magnificent views that we get everywhere, but and all the energy and all the stuff that's in the world of spirit too. All the world of meaning, all the world of expression, all the stuff that goes on in the world of spirit. How you feel. When your daughter was born and you looked in her eyes, there was meaning that was there. There was a spiritual thing that happened. Isn't that true for all of us? There's these times. When I first saw her, there was a place where there was meaning there. And it's never gone away. It's been by far the most important experience of my life. Who's to say that that's not real? That meaning has guided everything else that's happened in our life since that time. So obviously it's pretty real. I can't weigh it, I can't measure it like I can with things that are in the world of form, but things that are in the world of spirit are actually quite real. So all the stuff in the world of form, all the stuff in the world of spirit, the world of form is made out of matter and energy, but it's also made out of the containers called space and time. So therefore, God contains time. Time does not contain God. If time contained God, time would be God. Because time would contain all that is, right? But God contains time. You're made out of God. Guess what that means about you? You contain time. And that's a shamanic reality. And that's why shamans have the ability to see things that haven't occurred yet, or might have occurred a long time ago. Because when you touch the place inside that's divine, it's all inside of you. We contain time. Who you really are contains time. You are not your body. Your body is contained by time because it's a thing that's made in the world of form. Your body exists in this place called space-time, and it's made out of matter and energy, right? But that's just your body. If I were to cut off your arm, would you still be you? What if I were to cut off both your arms and both your legs? Would you still be you? You are something that is bigger than your body. You transcend time, and we'll get in a lot more of that as we go down this path. You contain time. Time does not contain you. And that's why it's impossible for there to be a heaven and a hell in that sense. Heaven is this place in Christian idea and Muslim idea pretty much, or I guess in the biblical sense would be a broader brush way of looking at it, where for eternity you're going to be able to live with God, which means from now forward. Obviously it doesn't mean from now backward, because as far as Christianity is concerned, you weren't here till you got born. I've never heard of a Christian faith yet that talks about us coming from heaven per se. What I do know, and there may be some, but what I do know for sure is based on what you do in time right now, if you don't please God according to that religion's standards, you are going to go to hell from here forward. Well, yeah, that's hell light, huh? Purgatory. That's right. Well, that way you could get bailed out, and you know, by gosh, the easy way out of that is why don't we go make it to the Vatican or wherever the Pope has given his papal blessing? And if you can be in the presence of a Pope when he gives his papal blessing, you don't have to do any purgatory time. Did you know that? Yeah. Do you ever wonder why so many Catholics and so many people from all over the world are always congregating to wherever the Pope is? That's a papal blessing. When you're in the presence of a papal blessing, no purgatory time. If you're in the presence of the Pope when he gives a papal blessing, your purgatory time is wiped out in that moment.
So does he give a papal blessing every time he comes to the
Every
people?
time he goes anywhere, he gives papal blessings. That's what he's doing when he's in that little Pope mobile or on his balcony, or he comes to America or goes to South America. He's always doing this. That's a papal blessing. And if you're in his presence when he's doing that, all your purgatory time is wiped out.
So then you just
Makes for great public relations, doesn't it?
Makes crowds show up too.
Makes crowds show up. Yeah. Yeah. And the point being, however, there, looking at this thing from a place of wisdom, what you're really saying in that place is that God and God's creation is actually contained by time. Because if God makes a judgment at this point in time that affects creation status from that time forward, is it God not living in time? But God doesn't live in time. God contains time. And if you're a part of God, if God is all that is and you're a part of God, how can you be consigned to a place where you're eternally separated from God? How can any of that make any sense? It can't. Now, when I brought these things up when I was in a Benedictine monastery to the abbot and to the powers that be, they weren't particularly thrilled with this. And it eventually got to the place where they got frustrated with me and said, well, there are some things you just have to take on faith. And that's that circular reasoning thing that happens again. This is true. The reason it's true is because you have to believe this. If you don't believe this, you go to hell. And if you don't believe this, it's because you don't have enough faith. So you have to have enough faith to believe this. It's circular reasoning. And people are quite content to engage in that. Now, why do you suppose people are quite content to engage in that? Why do people go into and accept circular reasoning as a way of being, relating to spiritual issues? They're unconscious. And in unconsciousness, when you don't know of something, when you're in the dark, what lives in the dark? Fear. When you're a little kid and you get put in a room at night and mom turns off the light, what are you afraid of? The boogeyman. The boogeyman lives in the darkness, right? You go turn on a light, the boogeyman goes away. Ultimately, what unconsciousness is denial of your divinity. It's a place where you can believe that who you are may not be or is not divine. If you're really in touch at a level of absolute realization, not at a level of belief, not at a level of mind stuff, but if you get it, that who you are is divine, what do you have to be afraid of? What is there to be afraid of? What is bigger than you? Nothing. So any fear that's going on inside of you is denial of your divinity. It's rooted in unconsciousness. Now, who here enjoys feeling afraid? No one. No one enjoys being afraid. And especially when we start getting into those places where we're not healthy, where our life doesn't look so shiny, where things are looking pretty dismal at times, and we all go through them. That's a part of this existence here. As we're going through those kinds of times, we're having those kind of difficulties, there's some big fear that can come up. Fear that makes being afraid of the boogeyman look like little stuff. And then when that happens, when that kind of fear comes up, we're looking for anything to be able to put that fear at bay. And that's where religions come in, with their belief systems, and their priests, and their ministers. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a part of life. They're a part of God too. And what happens is that we believe that if we do what these people tell us to do, we can be saved. And what we're really programming ourselves to believe is that we're going to be saved from our fear. But really what happens is we're not saved from our fear. We're saved from having to confront our fears. It's a cover-up for fear. And if I can get involved with a church and go to church on Sunday and do this and do that and make everybody happy and pay my donations and do my baptism and do my service work and do all that kind of stuff and have all those warm fuzzy experiences with all my friends, and that's all great and it's important. There's nothing wrong about this, but it is not a replacement for light. It's just a cover-up of fear. And what a lot of people do is they get real busy in their churches or they get real busy in their life. They start doing lots of stuff to try to be able to cover up the fear. But you see, life and the universe is constructed out of God. God is constructed out of love. And so because God is constructed out of love, the universe is constructed out of love. Reality, God, universe, reality, they're all the same thing, is constructed out of love. What happens is the universe doesn't let you get away with it. And it just keeps coming up with way after way after way after way of putting you face to face with whatever it is you're afraid of. And that's why in Huna, another postulate is that whatever you fear, you will create. And you'll notice in your life, if you think about it, that's very true. You show me somebody that's afraid of paying next month's rent, and I'll show you somebody that repeatedly has difficulty paying next month's rent. You show me somebody who's afraid of being able to have a healthy, life-giving relationship, and I'll show you somebody that is having a hard time having a healthy, life-giving relationship. You show me somebody who is afraid of having health problems, and I'll show you somebody who has a lot of health problems. Now, why do you suppose the universe does that? It's a loving universe, so what does the universe want you to do? What the universe is designed to do is teach you that you're bigger than anything that you can be afraid of. Why? Because you're divine. So as soon as you say, I'm afraid of something, the universe is going to attract that right to you and put it right square in your lap so that you can find out that you're bigger than whatever it is you were afraid of. You name me all these people who are afraid about being able to pay next month's rent, and I'll promise you that they were afraid of paying next month's rent 5 years ago. And they're still here, aren't they? They're afraid of having their house foreclosed on. They're still here. They're afraid of whatever. They're still here. Or the other thing that the universe will do is if you're afraid that you are not going to have enough money, and you think that money is the key to happiness in life, then the other thing the universe might do out of love for you is it might just give you a whole dump truck full of money. And you will find out that money does not buy happiness. Money makes you busy. Money doesn't make you happy. And you'll find out that your life can get very empty as you start chasing around all the stuff you got to do with money. And you start buying all kinds of stuff, and you find out the stuff doesn't make you happy. Or the same thing with guys who think that if they can just bed enough women, they'll be happy. And there's a lot of guys that your age and younger, especially, that is their whole thing in life, is talking about their buddies about who they nailed last night, is the way that they'll talk about it. And what happens is, after a while, you can have so many experiences like that, and it just gets absolutely empty. Absolutely, completely, and utterly empty. There's no happiness to be found in any of that. And then it gets bitter. And then you look at all these people that you use that way as objects, and you're afraid to run into them on the street the next time because they're looking at you like, what kind of a creep are you anyway? And you start looking in a mirror, and who you see is a creep looking back at you. So the universe is perfectly designed that way because it's made out of love. It's going to teach you that who you are is bigger than all of that. Fear is a denial of your divinity, and the universe is perfectly constructed to put you in touch with your fear. And beliefs are there to substitute for awareness of reality every place you're unconscious. I find this stuff absolutely stunning, actually. I never get tired of it. And the implications just go on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And I love talking in a large group of people, where I'm at, out in Colorado. We went and did this, and I talked about this at several churches. And you're looking out over an audience of people, and you see people going. And then you'll see for some of them the lights coming on. And then you'll see for some of them, they get a scowl on their face like they're listening to the devil incarnate. And it's just amazing to sit out there and watch. But when people start waking up, once people start on this path and start waking up, and that first aha comes, then what happens is that's followed by another aha and another aha, and you start at some point you start to wonder, how can I possibly wake up anymore? And then the next day you come to bed and you realize you've just done it that much more again. And the next day. And it's a lifelong process, because once you get in tune with reality and you start learning some basic skills and perspectives, then the lights start coming on in room after room after room after room after room after room after room. And you start finding out that you have tools that really work, that operate reliably and flawlessly about wakening you up. And any issue that you got that's coming up for you, it'll be a challenge. I'm not saying it's easy, but you got the tools that it takes now to move that energy and get life energy flowing again where it wasn't before. And there's something that's deep down real satisfying and liberating about that. And that doesn't mean all your problems will go away. It doesn't mean that your knees are going to start feeling better. But what's going to mean is that how you experience your knees not feeling good is not going to matter to the quality of your life or your ability to be in touch with the thrill that it is to be in touch with all that is.